Welcome to the first episode of ZuTalk, a brand new podcast series, and we're going to dig deep into the world of Zucoins. Many special guests that will be coming on our program with new episodes to come in the future, and a chance to ask questions for the community to get involved. So any questions, put them forward and we'll deliver them to the team at the right time. I'm going to be the host of ZuTalk. My name is Paul Hazelby. A bit about my background, former sports athlete. I now work in sports media over here in Western Australia. I've been an early adopter of Zucoins, a crypto enthusiast as well. But look, I don't atone to know everything about crypto. I'm not an expert, and that's why we're going to get the experts on ZuTalk. And who better to get on our first episode than our co-founder of Zucoins, Alan Andres. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, g'day, Paul. Pleased to be here. Yeah, very exciting to have this to come to fruition. So looking forward to it.
I want to dig a bit deeper into your journey around technology and also the payment space.
Well, it goes back a while now, Paul, but probably for me in my mid to late 20s, the 1980s was a pretty fashionable decade, and greed is good came out of that decade. So it was a tough era, but I did my stomping ground was really circling around accounting, mergers and acquisitions, being in a legal partnership with Peter Kane through Davis Samuel, and that's where we sort of got our start, and it was through that commencement of that period that led into a whole range of things over that period.
Tell us a bit about Splitlock. You spent some time developing Splitlock, and that becomes a key component of Zucoins.
Yeah, look, Splitlock is a crucial part, actually, Paul. It's one of those things where in that journey I've been involved with the payment systems, easy bonds back then, and a lot of that technology involved identification, compliance issues, what we see today, KYC, AML. And of course, you get a lot of unknowns because you're dealing with companies that were trying to conceal things as well. So we lost a lot of money through hacking, and hacking has been the flavour even today. It hasn't sort of changed, Paul. And it would be 13 years ago now, I actually stumbled into a fellow in Melbourne in a pub, a fellow called Andrew Churn, an inventor, quite a genius in his own right, and just happened to be overhearing and talking about this concept. He was putting pen to paper through some patents, which was all about data fragmentation and breaking down data and rendering it useless. And I guess the concept of Splitlock in its original form, which has evolved to where we see split chain, is that you've got two ways. You can encase data, you can try and protect it, which is sort of the M&M scenario. If you think of an M&M chocolate, the chocolate's covered and encased, and we're trying to protect the chocolate. That's your encryption normal that we see today. Andrew's concept was, well, why don't we change the format of the chocolate and create two M&Ms, one with caramel and one with peanuts, and then go looking for the chocolate. And it's near impossible to find the chocolate if you can break that down into two different components. So that was the beginning of Splitlock. We perfected that technology. It's fragmenting data into millions of pieces, basically having packets, and having a cryptographic hash key that sort of identifies those packets and brings them back together in the original M&M form, so you can access the chocolate. And
so in crypto, we've had the proof of work, we've had the proof of stake, but this is different from those two protocols.
Yeah, that's right. And if you think of that, the way in which the Splitlock moves itself into what we've called now split chain, that is breaking down data and taking the smaller bits and allowing them to reside with the peer as such. So instead of a large block that's growing in length and width and adding more data to it, which is the norm of blockchain, in order to validate more data into that block, you've got two basic concepts or protocols. One is the Bitcoin protocol that you see, which is proof of work. And in other words, it's a glorified term that simply means there's a lot of that they call them miners, which is your computer nodes, that are actively taking new data and adding it to the block through a whole verification process and algorithms. And that's your proof of work. And the second is you've got Ethereum, which is saying, well, similar concept of people or validating computers, validating transactions, but those that have the biggest stake, that is more to risk as a result of being part of the Ethereum network, get to the glory to validate those transactions. So they call that proof of stake. And we've introduced a third concept, a third protocol through split chain. And we're saying that because the peers have got each of these fractions and they can get on and off the network without any miners, either through proof of work or proof of stake, they actually validate the transactions themselves coming from that original Genesis block. So there is no growing block. It's bits and pieces that are left with each individual peer, and the peers can determine that themselves. And we've called that proof of peers for that obvious reason.
And miners, they obviously play a part with security. With proof of peer, is there any vulnerabilities from a security element?
Look, security really plays only into, not in terms of the protocol or the network. You certainly, it overcomes those issues of double spend and overcomes the hacking concept because there's nothing there to reside to hack. What you've got to do is ensure that the overall concept of the peer protecting his ability to access that data through the private keys and obviously the way that operates. So you then introduce concepts that gives that ultimate protection, which would stop that sort of hacking concept. And we say that that's far more protective, because if you've got 1 million people with fractions of bits and pieces, or 1 billion people for that matter, you're not going to go down the road of sort of aggregating data, which is what hackers like. They like to attack large databases where it's collected. And we've seen that in recent weeks. The exchange called Liquid out of Japan, $90 million of crypto was hacked and stolen. So it's more commonplace, but it would be less and less prevalent within the split chain network.
Tell us a bit more about the Zucoin wallet. We've had the early release. I was a part of that testing process, and I must admit, with new technology, you want it to be simple and easy, and it was that. It was a matter of just pushing a couple of buttons, downloading the wallet, but there was some new technology that the industry hadn't seen too much of. Can you go into some of the special components that are going to make Zucoin successful?
Yeah, look, I think the primary objective is once we knew we had the protocol in place, that is the network itself, to overcome the problems in blockchain, and that's I call that the trilemma. And basically, you're talking about speed and scalability and security. And in our case, there is no such concerns on those three levels, because when the peers are validating, it's instant. So your speeds are phenomenal. If you take a MasterCard or Visa network and you're talking 5,000 or 6,000 transactions per second. Well, there's no sort of number you can place on this because of the instantaneous network we run. But if you think of that, those concepts, and then you've got to say to yourself, well, how do we mass adopt this or create mass adoption? You then hit some brick walls, because you've gone beyond the overcoming the blockchain problems, and you end up in a world of human errors and usage. So a lot of our money and time has been spent what we call dumbing down that user experience, Paul, and that's actually turned out to be more difficult than the protocol itself. So features that we wanted to show was you don't want any more complications than what you have with a normal bank account and app. You basically want to see that you've got a few buttons, send, refresh, access to your settings. But when you think of a send function and in a bank concept, well, the banks are centrally controlling the way that data flows. So they know that they can move money from A bank to B bank relatively quickly through that centralization. But when you decentralize it, you end up with a whole lot of inherent new problems. And one of those was the simplicity of using the mobile phone as the basis upon which you can have people readily go from one phone to another. And that hasn't been done before in this context. And that's, of course, led to soft testing and soft launch, because you then want to make sure that people can receive the humble SMS text. And it might sound easy, but it's actually quite complicated, because like emails, there's a lot of phishing issues. There's a lot of phony emails, a lot of spamming that goes on. There's a lot of inbox issues that go to junk boxes. And it's the same concepts with SMS. So the feature of the wallet is getting that nearly to 100% perfection. And of course, then the wallet itself means that you can instantly send a fraction of a coin, of a Zucoin, and people within 2 clicks can receive the SMS, press a link, download the wallet instantly, receive their coin, and they're off and running. So we're doing a lot more testing on the colors and the flavors of that. Not that that's very important, but it's important in the sense that people understand what part of the app they're in without overcomplicating it. And if you achieve that, which is now where we're heading, it's going to be sensational because, anybody from, adolescence through to grandma and grandpa should be able to easily be comfortable with sitting on Zucoins and making them move between each other and merchants.
Which is a challenge, isn't it, for the industry in terms of ease of use of those wallets. It's not easy to get all that information for new people into the crypto industry. But you've got the 2 options there too, sending to a wallet address and also entering that mobile phone number, which makes it very simple.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, those that are diehard crypto gurus, well, they'll enjoy the norm that we see with, public keys and the way the private key operates. No issue with that. But that's really not where the world's heading. It's, that's a secular group of people that have been living and breathing crypto. They've got a handle on it. And what we want to see is that it's the mass adoption that's going to take it to another level. But to do that, you've got to make sure that mass adoption is comfortable with the way they, for example, back it up, how they back it up, and they have access use it, 24/7. So it's very reminiscent of the early days, I would say, Paul, of like Google, search engines. And the way that they approached it was very little marketing as such, but more so viral user experience, which gave them a lot of feedback and therefore a lot of capacity to launch Google search, which dominated and crushed, web crawler and Mr. Jeeves and all these sort of concepts. And same with Facebook. I mean, Facebook really wasn't a great innovation. I wouldn't have thought. You had MySpace and you had social media, but he took a few tweaks but he made that interactive relationship viral, which is the key. If you do that, then you'll dominate the marketplace.
Now you're ambitious. The goal and the mission of the company to get 1 billion users transacting with Zucoins, and you do have Bitcoin, and they're a store of value nowadays, and they're not used as much for transactions all around the world with merchants. But your plan is to bring on merchants, but to do that, you need instant point of sale ability. Do you think Zucoins will deliver that?
Yeah, we're confident we can do that, Paul. And when you say we're ambitious, it's only a 30-year overnight success ambition. There's a lot of components, a lot of cogs in the wheel that bring this together. It's reliant upon a lot of things that have happened over that 30 years and bringing it all together. So, look, there are apps, there are great success stories in the world of people that have captured the imagination of large databases. I don't think that's anything out of the ordinary now. If you go back 15 years and you talked, 10,000 or 50,000, 100,000 people, you're getting excited. Now, gamification apps, there's no question of 25, 30, 50 million people on an app. So even merchants on loyalty schemes, 3, 5, 10, 15 million people is no big deal. So the numbers are big, but then they're big in the context that that's the new norm. So if you get it right, then it's like Facebook. They started in a dorm at a school or university, and you got one campus that led to billions of users. So I don't see that as anything far-fetched. It's just that the technology will determine that. And of course, what you want to do is create a greater end user case. You just don't want, for me, crypto, to this day, I don't understand why it's worth what it is. And I don't think anybody can give me any sensible answers. I mean, I've come from a corporate accounting background, and there's a lot of history there with my litigation and that sort of stuff. So I get it, And if you gave me a balance sheet with a mining company, I can sort of give you numbers on gold reserves, and we can correlate that back to value. So the real key is then that if you design it right, you solve the viral peer-to-peer, then, you know, if you treat a merchant as a peer, then there should be no issue whatsoever in that transferability to buy and sell goods and services. And that's the game changer. You know, merchants simply want to be paid for their goods and services, either online or bricks and mortar. There's no hard parts about that, but that's been being in the payment industry, that's been a tough journey as well, because you've got, multi-currencies, you've got fees and charges, you've got delays on payments, and you tend to circle back to the Visa and MasterCard scenarios. You've got PayPal, of course, and that's sort of back-ended with those bigger companies. You've got a lot of, squares come out of the blocks, and but even then they've got hardware costs, and they've got all sorts of costs that are friction, and you've got to implement that sort of hardware at point of sale. So if you've got the humble phone, you've already got your hardware. If you've got an online account as a merchant website, well, you've already got an access point for transactions. And the big draw card is no fees and charges, and it's instant, and you can get instant convertibility with fiat. So, this will be the change that the crypto space has been looking for. You can't. I see some people talk about Bitcoin. You can buy a cup of coffee. Well, that might be right, but who wants to pay $25 for a cup of coffee because the transaction fee is so beyond the value proposition of a $4.50 cup of coffee, or who wants to wait for the networks to process those transactions? The real world we're in today demands real world time and instant times, and that's what Zucoins will deliver.
So no issues with speed. Obviously, you've got no miners involved. So from an environment point of view, eco-friendly, which is what the industry is also looking towards.
Oh, that's a huge tick. We're talking zero carbon emissions in terms of the processes. The participants in the network are already operating their own phone and have a relationship with that phone and what it does. The complete removal of third-party influence. And, for all the terminology, Paul, they talk about decentralization with Bitcoin, but it's not really. You can't have 9,000 or 10,000 miners as such that are still participants that need to create and affect the transaction into the blockchain. And same with Ethereum. So this is devoid of that. That is Zucoins. It's quite special. And as a result of that, the data is only as necessary that each individual peer needs to retain. It's almost just balancing transactions or balance totals with a minimal amount of transactional data. And that has a major impact on that carbon footprint, because, you're not running massive servers around the world. You're not trying to hook into hydro power plants and schemes and renewable energy, which seems to be the way they want to go, that, we'll solve this problem by increasing, the demands on that energy source and renewable energy. That's a good thing. But, you can pull that back in line with, the way the humble phone operates anyway.
No fees involved, so that's great for the merchants. Just going back to the unlimited fraction. So they are unlimited. You can go forever and a day, but as the price grows, it's obviously going to make it easier to transact with smaller items. Yeah,
there's two sets to that data. One is the unlimited fraction that you can play. By that we mean that, if Zucoin was trading at $1 million a coin, then you can still do a 1 cent transaction based on that fraction. What you want to do, though, is make sure that the visual doesn't complicate people, that they're seeing, 37 decimals after the point in their phones and things. So you still visually pull that back to a respectable visual look, but nevertheless, the firepower is there to take into account. So that's a fairly exciting and new area that Robert's got himself involved with to compute that. It's the divisional side was the most difficult part. Multiplication plus addition and subtraction was quite simple, and that's where there's a lot of inherent problems in that processing power. And he used it as a text message, a text method replication of the actual numerics. Robert would be more than welcome to share you how the intricacies of that work, but
We'll get him on in time.
Yeah, so that's a major breakthrough, because it lends itself to just not the coin, but the fraction value means it becomes an identifier for other products that you want to back end into the split chain network.
Yeah, I want to take you further on that. So you are a big picture vision type of guy. Can you take us on a bit of a journey of where you think this will go in terms of use cases for Zucoins in the future?
Well, Paul, I'm hoping that having done my highest level was 3-unit maths and physics, I'm hoping that my 30 years will compress over the next couple of years to the most exciting part, because I want to be around when Robert starts to unleash some of these things, and not drag out for another 20 years on other products that are coming through, because they are unbelievably powerful and compelling. And if you tick a few boxes, you can associate that with things like, for example, virtual real estate. The sleeper in the organization is Zucoins. It's a powerful augmented reality geo-mapping tool. It's Pokemon Go on steroids. It's that new way that merchants communicate direct with consumers in a very visual sense, in a very productive economic sense, by not having any money up front and allowing those dollars to go direct to consumers, which is what we do with the redemptions on vouchers. And if you think of that, it means that wherever people are, and especially in this COVID environment, you've got a lot of people at home that, there's a lot of issues and mental health issues and things, and this can bring another layer of activity, if you like, for goods and services direct to your home. When you do your walks and walkabouts, certainly they're available. And because we've got that tracking capability, it lends the coin or the fraction to identify a value proposition that the virtual real estate royalties can be paid as a result of that foot traffic and traction on those vouchers. Now, we've seen virtual real estate, we've seen how people paying big dollars for things, but there's a disconnect between the real world and virtual world. Zucoins and Zucoins is the reconnection, the bridge between those worlds that pays real dollars based on some of the virtual assets that you're retaining. And, I've been on record probably 3 years ago now, talking about the next box that you want to tick is, what we're seeing excitement with NFTs. I mean, why people will be paying 1.6 million for a virtual rock is staggering. And the problem with those things is that they're still locked in to the centralized control of those platforms or protocols that they're stuck with. So if they switch off or there's a glitch, you could be stuck with a $1.6 million, picture that's sitting on your screen on a phone, not necessarily retention of the NFT. So that box in itself is a whole new world that Robert can create for brands and merchant value propositions. We've talked about the racing industry, a whole raft of sporting bodies, all those sort of collectibles can then be traded amongst each other and retained by the peer on the peer's phone without any third party having any say or input as to the way you look at that NFT or whatever. And more importantly, you can then trade that with no fees and charges amongst each other using Zucoins. I bought an NFT to test it with the team, an Ethereum one, an alligator blood one actually. And, it was $200 in fees, for a $1,200 item. So that's a significant inhibitor if you want people to make money based on instantaneous transfer. The third box that I want to see completed is a completely decentralized social media platform. As you know, I experiment with the reactions and the negative stuff that comes out with trolls and things. Now, there's a deliberate reason that I do that and come out pretty hard, and people get upset about it. And the negatives aren't good, but it's better to test it earlier than later. And that is that a completely decentralized platform can eliminate all that data storage by those third parties, whether you're Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, or, they're making the money on these people that are promoting negative or positive views one way or the other. Whereas a decentralized platform, which, we'd like to think called ZuChat, operates on the same principles as the coin, but it's peer retention of their own data, videos, pictures, SMS, streaming, which you can flick a switch on and off as to who you want in a public or private environment without a third party having access to that data. That's a pretty powerful tool. So I'd like to see that sort of thing in play. And the last one that really is a 30-year dream is the lottery concept that I've had through the Easy Bond days that needs to come to fruition. And that's getting far more exciting now because some young people are starting to realize that I wasn't sort of a loose cannon, the way in which that value proposition works. And it's based on premium bonds. It's a savings concept. I've had the rights to that for 30 years. It's all about, and that's part of the government case, actually, the 4.3 billion that we're suing on, where, you leave money on deposit through the banking institutions and you get rewarded in a random lotteries, either paid in cash or now it could be in Zucoins. And Matthew pointed out to me the other day, actually, there's a crew in America called Yotta. And within 12 months, $250 million has been on deposit for savings concept along those lines.
Just in terms of the industry, no doubt you and Robert keep a close eye on what's going on. And over the last 3 years, the innovation within crypto has improved from a speed and cost point of view. We've had Tesos and IOTA. Solano recently has gone for a good run. You've got HBAR, Ripple, of course, Ethereum is going well. Cardano, the other one. How much do you keep on track of what they're doing? And how does what they're doing compare with what you think we've got?
Look, Robert certainly keeps an eye and a very in-depth researcher on all those fronts. What I can say is that there is nothing that's new that's come out beyond the current way in which those products are built on the existing blockchains. So the whole they're following like sheep is that they've latched on to the concepts of the original blockchain methodology and protocol, and everybody's following. So the innovation has been quite limited in real terms beyond, those thought bubbles. Whereas we are front running something completely new that allows us to surpass where they're heading with that sort of blockchain. I mean, there's limitations in all of that. I mean, they're just like a packet of cigarettes. If you think of the great Philip Morris and you say, well, you've got Marlboro and you've got B&H and so on. They're all got the same tobacco. There might be different quantities and so forth, but they're all the same tobacco. They all get wrapped the same way, and all of a sudden there's a new brand, and you've got 55 different cigarette brands. And that seems to be the general movement in the crypto space. They want to stick with ERC20. Why? Because the developers have got a handle on it. They understand what they're doing, and they can create a new brand. The difficulty they're having is if you drill into any of those coins or cryptos and try and work out what is the real value proposition, I would say to you that you would struggle to find a compelling reason as to why you buy it in the first place, other than speculation and the hope that it goes up. And that's the difficulty with crypto. There is no serious end user case environment because they can't deliver based on the problems inherent within the blockchain. Now, certainly mainstream businesses adapted to blockchain because it's a good way for, say, a stock exchange who's centrally controlling things to have a central block that creates a consistency of the transaction histories, and block works for that. But when you push it out into crypto, that's a whole different story.
Going forward, we know we're not far away from the release of the wallets, then on the exchanges. What happens after that from a development point of view? It becomes open source, and how do you see that playing out, and what happens from our own development point of view internally?
Well, from an external point, that's the beautiful part, which is where you see the evolution of, you mentioned a whole lot of crypto there before, DeFi and all that sort of stuff, because people realize that is a good protocol and they can make business models out of that for their own purposes. And we'd like to think that there'll be a lot of geniuses around the world that'll realize and sit up and take notice that, wow, I've got a magnificent, V12 engine running under the bonnet, under the hood, and let's now look at the different stylings and the cars that they can produce. If you think of that environment with what we've got, so we've done the hard work, the hard yards. We'll get value proposition out of Zucoins as a result of it. But the real excitement will be other ideas and concepts that add into and add weight to the protocol itself, which does enhance the coin, because, someone can take one single Zucoin, no matter what price, and convert that into a fraction with, 10 million bits. And suddenly they've got identifiers, for example, in a game of Thrones, that's a game that people are playing for swords and shields and things, that adds weight to, there's no fees and charges on those fractions, and therefore allows them to move that around amongst participants. So I'm excited about that. Excited to see what new ideas come out of it. From our point of view, we're just focusing in on increasing the user case experience and the user numbers through what we know in our sector, which is merchants. I talked about that before. It's about the peers themselves. I don't think there's going to be a lot of work on the wallet itself. I think, there's a bit like the cigarettes again. There might be different flavors and colors and wallets that come out, but at the end of the day, you just want to see a balance, a send function. You just want to see that you've got your protection of your private key, and people will use that. A bit like the analogy we use, a bit like a debit card, I guess, Paul. There's a lot of work to get a debit card to operate around the world. It just doesn't miraculously pop up. The Visa and MasterCard networks are very complicated. You've got authorizing banks, you've got issuing banks, you've got banks behind it. There's a lot of work, but the consumer doesn't care about that. All he wants to know is he's got a MasterCard with ANZ, and he can go and buy his coffee with it, and taps and goes and walks away. So we see ourselves in that space, that this allows others to either complicate it or whatever they want to do with it. Whereas our role will be the excitement. I see the future with the ZUCAS, the merchant modeling. That's a $500 billion industry in itself. That's plenty on our plate. Virtual real estate is massive. If we can sell the planet again, well, you can do the maths on that in a virtual sense. ZuChat will be absolutely phenomenal, because that's a way that you're putting the power of data back into the hands of peers, where peers can make money themselves, and if they so wish to on-sell that data, then they can make money. That hasn't happened before. At the moment, it's the major players, and certainly the lottery. At last count, and this is only the 2019 and 2020 annual report, there's 179 billion pounds in the British premium bond lottery concept. So there's a big future in that, and that's a reward back to consumers. So that's our focus internally. Robert's got some other incredible ideas that come out of left field that makes your head spin. Quantum computing, which is incredible. The way in which he can explore the power of Splitlock to a point that individuals will have a free app that allows every single bit of their data to be split crypted. That's a game changer. So there's plenty on our plate, but hopefully we can compress that into a couple of years and not 30.
What about smart contracts? Clearly, Cardano are doing an upgrade on their system to get towards that. Ethereum's been trying to do that with their protocols. What about Zucoins? What can that offer, and how easy will that component be?
Yeah, look, that's another incredible unsung hero, really, the way Robert's built that, because, if I come to you, Paul, and say I want a smart contract using, Ethereum, that's all well and good. But by the time we enter into contracts and we get the concept of why we want a smart contract, it may be as simple as, attaching a crypto to transferring real estate or a title to a property, or some shares, or whatever concept you wish. There's a whole evolution of developers that need to get involved. There's a whole process before you even get to the point of a coin that represents that smart contract. What Robert's done is reverse that whole thinking. And if you think of a smart contract, it's a legal, it's the legal basis upon which a couple of parties want certain things to happen, and you want a record of that people can't attack it to discount the contractual value that's in that smart contract. So what he's done is the humble description box that comes with the transfer of a Zucoin. Now, we're all used to, sending and transferring money through the bank. And, Paul says that the invoice is now, 919. I put that on, and effectively that transfer of money represents, that agreement that I've paid invoice 919 as a reference. Now, people don't realize the significance of that, because in contractual terms, really, you and I may have an argument that you say that was for invoice 930, and I say, well, it's 919. Well, there's your smart contract point of difference, and I would rest my case on what I put on that reference. So he's created a description box that when I send the Zucoin or a fraction, there's no limitations on that size of that description box, because the power of our data is fragmented and it's sitting with the peers. Whereas if you think of a bank, generally it's about 18 characters, because they're holding 3 million accounts. And if everybody does 18 characters by 3 million every transaction, there could be tens of thousands of transactions a day. Their database is cumbersome and clunky because they've got to store it. So the hosting of that is quite onerous. In our case, there's no limit. So I can actually attach a link on that description box that we provide, that it's a link to an electronic agreement, for example. And lo and behold, if you receive that fraction and you acknowledge the link and you acknowledge the electronic agreement, which is, on another server or sitting with me, there, lo and behold, is our smart contract. So he's created a peer contract, a peer smart contract that, the definition of peer can be a business, it can be a merchant, it can be a government organization, it could be an individual. It doesn't matter. And that's a game changer, because you're not reliant upon an industry to dictate the terms of how to create that token that relates to a contract. And as I said earlier, they're like, a flock of sheep. They're all going down one path, because that's the norm and that's all they have in front of them. Whereas there's a whole new world happening here. We're at the beginning of something pretty special.
Can't wait for it. We could talk for another hour, but we're going to wrap it up today with that. We're going to get you back onto ZuTalk episode number 2. We're also going to throw it open to many of our community out there. If you want to ask some questions of Alan, if you want to dig deeper into certain information, feel free to provide those questions. And on our next episode, we're going to put that through. If you are interested, there is more information at www.zucoins.com. Check that out, but we'll be back for ZuTalk number 2. Thanks for your time, Alan.
Thanks, Paul. Cheers, mate.